Welcome to Life Wants to Grow. Last episode, I left you off with my visit to the NAPRO Technology OBGYN. This time, I'm going to talk about what happened within a couple of weeks of that visit. So that visit was February 27th of 2020. And like I said, I felt really hopeful and like the most positive I had felt since getting the news about my tube issues in January. And so I had a couple of work trips. I'm a coach for a women's triathlon team, and I was away in Florida, and I was feeling just a little bit off, but I kind of always feel off with some travel, and, it's a 3-hour time difference from here to Florida. So I kind of just chalked it up to, okay, it was just some travel, and, it's always stressful when we head to a race because you want the team to perform. So I come home, and the first Monday I'm back, my basal body temperature is so high, and I'm like, I hope I'm not getting sick. And then it dawned on me. I was like, well, I haven't gotten my period yet. Maybe I'm pregnant. So I debated for an hour or two, go to Target, grab some pregnancy tests, come home, and I could hardly believe my eyes. There was a second line there, faint, but still there. And immediately my first reaction was, oh God, I can't take another one because what if I don't get another positive test? I just felt like it was some happy accident, and I wanted to just live in that world for a second. And so I drove down to my husband's office, and I showed him a picture of the test, and we were just so excited. I couldn't believe it. I was just in shock. And like 2 weeks prior to that, we'd been telling our families, hey, it's going to be a while, just so you know. And, our close friends that we'd been keeping up to date, hey, it's going to be a while. So we told everybody that already knew the whole situation basically immediately. And everyone was really excited for us. And we kind of couldn't believe our luck. We were like, oh my gosh, okay, like maybe this won't be an issue after all. Maybe the first doctor was wrong, and, the second doctor was right, and it's going to be fine. So that was March 9th of 2020 that we got the positive test. And for work later that week, I had to get on a plane to Florida. But later that week is also when all of the pandemic stuff really started to hit hard. And I actually got pulled off of the plane, and I had to, make emergency arrangements to bring some of the student athletes that were in Florida home. And basically just with not knowing what was going on and kind of the severity of the circumstance, my institution said, until further notice, everybody is working from home. Take care of yourselves, take care of your family. And I was really worried. A couple of years ago, I had a really bad case of pneumonia, and I had some scarring in my lung tissue, and I was just really afraid. So my stress level was really high. And Monday, March 16th, I started bleeding. And my heart sank the second I saw the blood in the toilet. I was like, I was shaking. I was so upset. I called my OBGYN crying, is there anything I can do? And she put me on some progesterone suppositories, took my blood work. So I had my progesterone and my HCG tested that day. And I was so upset and so worried. But then I told myself, okay, well, worst case scenario, this is a proof of concept. It happened. We didn't even think it could happen. We'd been told it was really unlikely to happen. So I had that little piece to hold on to. Like, okay, maybe it's a genetic abnormality. Maybe my body is just rejecting, this embryo for some reason, and it's going to be okay. And so 2 days later, I went and did another HCG test. My progesterone was a little low, but relatively normal. It was 19, so, you like it to be more in the 20s, but it wasn't anything to really be concerned about. And 2 days later, my HCG, it was rising, which I was really excited about, but it wasn't rising at the normal level. So it had not quite doubled in the 48 hours. I think at that time it was doubling at more of a 60 or 70 hour rate. So I didn't know how to feel. I didn't really know much about it. I didn't really know if I should be excited that the levels were going up or if I should be upset. I hadn't stopped bleeding. I'd been spotting every single day, and the spotting got darker and darker. And so in my heart, I felt like there's something not right. And I went in to see the NAPRO OBGYN, and she's a very, very kind woman. And she just kind of shot me straight, and she was like, listen, it's not normal to have this kind of bleeding in any type of pregnancy. We will monitor you. We will get you in for an early scan. But at this point, we don't really know what's happening. So she kind of set me up with not pessimism, but realism, which I, looking back on it, really appreciate. So I left the appointment sad, but just kind of in between because I really didn't know what was going to happen yet. And a few days later, I had my first scan, and I can't remember exactly. I think I was 6 weeks and 5 days, maybe, right around 6 weeks along. And so, you should be able to maybe hear or see a heartbeat, and definitely see a gestational sac in the womb. I'm in there, and it's a transvaginal scan, obviously, because it's very early on, which aren't comfortable to begin with, but it was really painful. And I was like, wow, I don't know if it's supposed to feel like this, just thinking that in my head. And luckily, my husband was able to come in with me, which was really comforting. And so we're sitting there, and the sonographer is very quiet. She's not really saying much. And I'm watching her, make these measurements on the screen. And I see her make a measurement for right ADX. And I'm like, I wonder what that means, because it was kind of a larger measurement. And I just didn't have a good feeling, since it just really didn't feel good. And fortunately, you follow up the scan with a doctor's appointment right away. So we had, maybe 10 minutes in the lobby to sit there and worry. And my doctor takes us back, and I could tell from her facial expression it was not going to be good news. She said there was no gestational sac in the womb, and that it was still somewhat early, especially since I hadn't been charting yet. They weren't positive of the dating that I had. So she sent me home with the caveat of, if you have any increase in pain or any increase in bleeding or anything abnormal, call us and go to the emergency room. So I'm also a runner and a triathlete and stuff. And she was like, no runs out on your own. If you have to go out and do something, make sure that it's not in the middle of nowhere, and that you have your phone and that you can call just in case anything happens to you. But she really was trying to get me to not do anything. I'm an anxiety runner. So when things go wrong, all I want to do is move. So early the next morning, I wake up and I just have this really bad pressure on my peritoneum. I went from asleep to not really being able to comfortably sit down. And I was really worried because, of course, I am a master at Googling everything. And all I could find was an ectopic pregnancy, and that is very dangerous. It's an emergency situation. And so my husband's like, you have to call. You need to call them. I called the doctor on call. He tells me to go into the hospital. I'm very fortunate because we live nearby a hospital that my NAPRO OBGYN does surgery at. So I was able to go to that hospital and be admitted in case I had to have surgery. She could perform it, because one of the benefits to NAPRO is that especially in issues of tubal infertility or tubal abnormalities or ectopic pregnancies, they don't automatically just remove your tube. They see if there's any way that they can save the tube or repair the tube. And this hospital also happens to be a Catholic hospital. So going in there, as I said, it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. So I had to go in by myself. And as you can imagine, I was absolutely terrified. I really don't think I've ever been that afraid in my life. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. All I wanted was for the baby to be okay and to go home. But unfortunately, the ER doctor, she was hyper conscious because she was seeing COVID patients, and she didn't even want to come, close by me to check me out. She tried to keep her distance and immediately had them put in IVs on either side on both sides of my arms, because she was worried that they'd have to give me a blood transfusion right away if my tube were to rupture. So they do a confirmation HCG. My levels had gone way up from the last time. I think the second HCG was somewhere in the 400 or 500s, and at the hospital that day it was 8,000 something. So they had increased quite a bit, and another ultrasound in the emergency room confirmed that it was an ectopic pregnancy in my right tube. And I had never had surgery before. I'd never been under general anesthesia, and the extra layer of not being able to have my husband there by my side in the midst of all this, it was so surreal and shocking. So they brought me up to the OR to prep me for surgery, and it was so strange because all elective surgeries had been canceled, so I was the only one on the floor, the only patient on the floor. And there were, a couple of nurses, and they were so kind. They knew that it was my first pregnancy. They knew that I was going to have surgery, and they knew that I was not going to have that baby. And sorry. They were so kind. They kept reassuring me that everything was going to be okay. They held my hand, and they gave me this little pin that said, "In loving memory of your angel baby." And it was really difficult being in there alone and being so scared and so upset that our little miracle, we felt like it was actually not going to be a miracle. And so anyway, they prepped me for surgery, and I don't think I would have made it through if they hadn't been so kind. my doctor came in, which it was really nice to see a familiar face, and she explained to me that if there was enough of my tube left, that she would only take the portion that the baby was in and leave the rest of my tube, so that in a future surgery, she could reattach the two sides of my tube. And at my previous appointment, we had talked about, at my initial appointment, I should say, we had talked about me coming in for an exploratory surgery and her checking out my hydrosalpinx on the left side and seeing more about what was wrong on the right side and what gave it its unusual shape. So fortunately, while she was in there addressing the ectopic pregnancy, she was also able to look at my left tube, and she was able to just kind of get an idea of what she had ahead of her if we were to go ahead and do the surgery to fix the hydrosalpinx and reattach the tube on the right side. So I get through surgery and I wake up and I FaceTime my husband because he still couldn't come in, obviously, at this point. And the next few weeks were just completely surreal. It was right at the beginning of lockdown, and I couldn't go to work because we weren't allowed to show up in person. We had virtual things here and there, but all I really could do was sit at home and sit with the pain and the reality of the situation. And it was hard. I'm the kind of person that likes to keep my momentum and likes to keep moving. And so sitting at home during the lockdown and just kind of processing everything was really difficult. And fortunately, I had started with a therapist prior to all of the pandemic craziness. And I continued with her in the first couple of months following this situation. The way my work does it is you have 6 visits with somebody who's affiliated with the institution, and then you're transferred out to care of somebody outside of the institution. And so I transitioned to somebody outside of the institution, I think around May. And one of the things that I'm really happy that I did throughout that time is I kept a journal. And especially at the beginning, I was journaling every single day. I had so many thoughts and so many feelings, and it felt really good to just kind of like regurgitate them onto the page and get them out of my head. Because if I didn't, which I did try a couple of days, I was like, maybe I don't need to do this every day, but I would just stir and think, and it would just be kind of like rubbing an open wound over and over and over again. And so the journaling really helped me get the sadness and the emotions out onto the paper. And it was very therapeutic. So I highly recommend that if you're going through, a loss or any difficult situation. I mean, infertility as a whole is really stressful and it's a tough situation. And so the journaling can be really helpful to get everything out of here and onto the paper. My husband and I each wrote a letter to that baby that we lost. And we have a little bottle that we put the letters in, and I attached a ribbon with the pin that they gave me at the hospital to the outside of the bottle. And it's kind of just our sweet reminder of that little soul that we never got to meet. I highly recommend little mementos or something. It helps to ground you in the reality of the situation, and that also helps you to move on. At least it did for me. And so I highly recommend something like that. Sorry, such a heavy episode. But this is what I'm here for. to share stories like this. So if you're going through something like this, I'm very sorry. Sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for your pain. We're here for each other. There's a community of women that I'm finding is so sweet and welcoming. And so if you need to talk, or if you're grieving a loss, or if you have any questions about my experience, please reach out. The next episode will go through a little bit more cheery things. I'll talk a little bit about, coming out of that ectopic pregnancy, scheduling my surgery to fix my tubes, and our first meeting with an IVF doctor. And it'll be a little bit more cheery than this one. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.